Warning, the following podcast contains spoilers for Fazbear Fright books. If you do not want to hear them, I suggest just not listening or getting the book yourself, whatever. Otherwise, minor language warning, and yeah, that's about it. Enjoy. Well, it has been done. It is finally here. Fazbear Frights. Story number 21 of Book 7, He Told Me Everything. This one is connected to Five Nights at Freddy's, but of course it's not entirely connected. And, of course, as I said in the cliffs, if you hear the wrinkling of the book, as I just did now, I'm sorry, including background noise, because I can't get rid of it, and I'm trying my best. But, anywho, here we go. We're going to have some laughs, I'm going to commentate, I'm going to mess up on words, like I've done the last 2 times. Hope you enjoy. If you like it, then like it. Please, it helps me out, and I would love to be a little bit more prominent. Hey, 30 followers, and I make a Doki Doki song. How about that? Fair deal? Probably nobody's listening to this by now. But then again, maybe you are. Okay, anywho, here we go. Our main character of the story is Chris. And the first line of the story that Chris says, "I wish we were a nice family." Chris said he and his parents and sister sat around the second-hand dinner table, eating hot dogs and canned baked beans and macaroni and cheese that had come from a box. So, we're already beginning off with this. He has 2 parents and a sister, so this is probably going to be sort of like another replication of the Afton family. They really love doing replications of it, especially because the dad is a little bit more like it. And you'll see, because they make a very interesting details in the next couple of paragraphs. I'll read them out to you. "What the heck is that supposed to mean?" Chris' dad said. He was still wearing his uniform from the garage with his name, Dave, stitched in cursive letters over the shirt's breast pocket. "Do you think we're all a bunch of jerks or something? I mean, look at your mom. Is this the face of somebody who isn't nice?" Chris's mom flashed an exaggerated smile and fluttered her mascara-painted eyelashes. "And what about your little sister here? She's not nice." Chris's dad pointed a forkful of macaroni and cheese in Emma's direction. "I'm very nice," Emma said, pushing her glasses up on her freckled nose. She was in 4th grade and was, Chris thought, bossy beyond her years. She gestured at her green uniform, complete with a sash full of badges. "I'm a Girl Scout and everything." "See, it doesn't get nicer than that," Chris's dad said. "And everybody who knows me, I'm a reasonably nice guy. At least that's what they say. The guys at the garage, my customers, my buddies I go bowling with, people tend to like me, or at least they generally don't run away when they see me approaching them." He reached for another hot dog, a mistake, given his growing waistline, Chris thought, and squirted it with an excessive amount of mustard. "So what do you mean when you say our family isn't nice?" Chris felt his father had misunderstood him. This was a regular occurrence. "No, you're all nice people," Chris said. "That wasn't what I meant. What I meant was..." Chris searched in vain for words that would express his thoughts without offending his family members. "I guess I don't know exactly what I mean." But really, Chris knew exactly what he had meant. His parents were decent people. See, we're going to start messing up on words. Good citizens who loved their kids and worked hard for their family and community. His little sister was annoying in the way younger siblings were, but he would never say that she was a bad person. That being said, when he compared his family to the families of the smartest kids in school, they fell short. So, I decided to read that out for you just so you can get a feel what this is going to be about. Chris, of course, fan made name by the community for the crying child, may have probably been put in here on purpose. Then we have Dave, the fake name of William Afton in the Silver Eyes books series. Don't know if this is probably not connected at all to it. I don't know even what I was thinking, because Elizabeth Afton is his daughter there, not Emma. So yeah, Emma? I'm trying to think. I don't think we've never had a girl named Emma. And then the mom's name is not said. But this could be a little bit of a reference to who the mother is in the story. So yeah, that's why I decided to talk about it. Also, the fact is that William Afton is originally mentioned to be fat-ish. Not being rude or anything, just saying that he's mentioned to be fat-ish in the Silver Rise trilogy. So, them saying that, eating one more hot dog would overpush his waistline. Like, really, Chris? Really? So yeah, that's about it. But now we're going to start learning about Chris. So, Chris feels like his family deserves a lot better than they have. They're very cheap. His mom works as a cashier and his dad is a mechanic. And they don't have a lot of money, sadly. He wanted to go to a nice college and be smart and be, famous, things like that. And he wishes that he could be, as he says, a nice family. Or that's what he means by wishing he would live in a nice family. So it ends up being Emma's turn to do the dishes, and Chris has to help out Miss Thomas, the next door neighbor, with the trash. And then he has to take Pork Chop, the dog next door, aka Miss Thomas's dog, for a walk. He didn't want to do any of the tasks, and he ends up saying, well, he doesn't say it, but he thinks, why are parents always exploiting kids for free labor? And he's like, oh, I'm busy, tomorrow's the first day of school back, and I don't really want to do it. And she's like, taking out Miss Thompson's trash and walking Pork Chop will take 30 minutes. That gives you plenty of time to get your stuff ready for school tomorrow. And he's like, okay, but I won't like it. And she's just like, I know you won't like it. It's part of my evil plan to oppress you. Mwahaha, mwahaha. I don't know what I'm doing. She did a fake laugh like a villain in a cartoon. Come on, I'm trying to make you laugh here. Emma, who was already clearing the table, laughed, but Chris wouldn't give his mother the satisfaction. So he gives, the big old sigh like, fine. And he goes to take care of Miss Thompson, or Miss Thomas, I don't know why I said Thompson. And he's like, oh, could I possibly... He ends up saying, in a flashback, could I possibly get money for it? And his dad ended up saying no. So, yeah, sad things, So Chris knocks on the door. She comes up. She doesn't really have much of a description. When she finally came to the door, she was wearing the same yellow cardigan she wore year-round. Even now, when it was hot outside, she was a tiny, delicate, bird-like woman. Her glasses were thick, and her hair was thin and gray.
Hello, Christopher. It's so nice of you to come over and help me.
Apparently she's Southern in here, because that's the accent I just did. Great. So she says that there's a bag of trash that needs to be taken out, and she ends up saying,
could I interest you in some cookies before I put you to work?
And he says, no thank you, I just had dinner. Her cookies are the cheap kinds at, the 99-cent stores, things like that. And she's like,
well, that's never stopped me from having a cookie or two,
Miss Thomas said, smiling.
Your mother tells me you're starting high school tomorrow. That must be exciting for you.
Yes, ma'am, Chris said, anxious for his conversation to end so he could get back to doing stuff that really... He's a bit of a brat.
She was bragging about what a good student you were, and about how much you love to learn. I taught at your high school for many years, English literature. If you ever need any help with anything academic, just let me know. And if you ever want to borrow any of my books, you're always more than welcome to.
Thanks, but I'm more of a science guy than a literature guy.
Don't put yourself in a pigeonhole yet. You're too young,
Miss Thomas said.
And there's absolutely no reason you can't be both a science guy and a literature guy. There are so many wonderful things in the world to learn.
Chris lifted the garbage bag and filled it mostly with empty cat food tin. What is... My spring locks are going off again. Chris lifted the garbage bag, filled mostly with empty cat food tins, out of the trash can. Jesus! He takes them out. He goes to Pork Chop. Is Pork Chop their dog? No. Yes, it is their dog. Sorry, that's my fault. Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my fault. It is their dog. I don't know why I forgot that for some reason. So basically, Chris goes on saying how he wanted a dog, like a Shetland sheepdog or a Border Collie. You know, one of the purebred dogs. And then his father came home in 6th grade with Pork Chop, a brown and tan, overgrown, snaggletooth shelter mutt who bore no resemblance to the elegant herding breeds Chris admired. It was immediately clear that Pork Chop also lacked the intelligence to learn the tricks or agility skills Chris had dreamed of teaching a dog. Instead, Pork Chop was a happy idiot whose favorite activities focused on his belly, or filling it, or getting rubbed. I don't know why I said or filling it. Either filling it or getting rubbed. What is going on? Is my audio perceptors just not working? I'm reading it. It's going through my head, but it's just not coming out right. Like, blah! My spring locks, man. They're killing me today. In this rocking chair, man. It's very comfy. So he goes, ready for a walk. He takes care of the dog. He gets all his chores done. He goes home. He comes back home, I mean. He packs everything away. He begins talking about the science club at West Valley High. Mr. Little's science class, a.k.a. And basically it's lit by plasma balls and lava lamps, strings of glowing light bulbs. And here's a quote. He was famous for demonstrating spectacular experiments that involved fire or carefully controlled explosions, though he said he made sure students didn't work on anything that would put them in actual danger. He was also famous for jump-starting student projects that produced extraordinary results, and almost always won science fairs when West Valley competed with other schools. Science Club was famous for bringing back numerous trophies for West Valley, and Science Club students had the reputation of being the school's highest achievers. On freshman orientation day, when new students were given the opportunity to sign up for clubs, Chris had made a beeline for the Science Club table. It was the only club he signed up for. Why waste your time on anything inferior, Chris thought, when you can be with the best? So yeah, he's very uppity, and he wants to just be the best. And you'll see how this gets worse. Like, you'll begin to dislike this kid. I mean, not as much as Matt from In the Flesh, because he was a very disliked character by everybody in the community. Oh, don't worry, I will be getting to that, eventually. So, his mom says, Chris, your friends are at the door. Josh and Kyle are his friends at the time, and he wants to prepare, but he has to go. So basically, Josh has like the long hair, long dark brown hair. He's letting it growing out through the summer. He's wearing a rock t-shirt basically, and he was a little bit nervous that Josh and Kyle are going to West Valley High with him tomorrow. They had been his friends since, they were in preschool together. And they were really nice guys. But he says this. He feared the image they projected wouldn't go over well with the Science Club kids. He didn't want his old friends to hold him back from making new, higher status friends. Wow. Just wow. I mean, we've already dealt with a dad with depression. And we've already dealt with, what was it? A kid who really hates this bully. So, this is a change, but it's not a change I like. I'd rather just go back and read the Breaking Wheel. And I don't want to read the Breaking Wheel again. That was traumatizing by a lot. So, they're going to the high school. They say, they're going to high school tomorrow. And they're like, you want to go over to the dairy bar? We'll ride our bikes and stuff. And he's like, yes, we will. And Chris thinks this. He supposed he might as well come along for old time's sake. Tomorrow his life was going to change. It'll be full of smart friends, science projects, and academic achievement. The bike rides and ice cream of childhood would just be a memory. Sure, why not? And yeah, I don't like him. He's almost Matthew level. That's how bad that is. Matthew level's like the worst level there possibly is. So, on we go. So they get their customary chocolate vanilla swirl cones. Nothing pretty much interested. They basically go and say, oh, we haven't seen you much on the server lately. They play a school. Why do they play a school? No, they play an online quest game called Night Quest. I actually searched it up. There's a game called Night Quest about knights in shining armor. It actually came out in 2019. Pretty recent game. But no, this one's called Night, as in, the moon and stuff. So, he's like, oh no, there's more important things going on. He's like, oh, I'm worried about the future. And then Josh is like, the future with the robot overlords and flying cars? Yes, we're going back to the future. If we're gonna go back in time, I'm gonna go smack Chris. That's my dream, to just go back in time and smack Chris. No, my dream is to go back in time to the breaking wheel and make him go with his friends. Or go back and have him not lock in Julius. Because, obvious reasons. So Chris says, no, like my future, my goals, what I want out of life. That's some pretty heavy thinking for summer break, Kyle said. At the beginning of summer, I take my brain out, put it in a jar, put the jar on a shelf, and don't take it out again until school starts. Man, I wish we could do that. Josh laughed. So, that's what you'll be doing when you get home tonight? Putting your brain back in your head? Nah, I'll probably wait till the morning. No need to start thinking any sooner than I have to. Josh and Kyle were both laughing. I'm laughing internally. As in Mimi, the Reaper. I'm laughing internally. But Chris couldn't muster a smile. How do you even end up being friends with these losers? Wow. You suppose it was just because Josh lived next door and Kyle lived across the street. They had been flung together because they were the same age and lived in the same place. If Chris had grown up in a nicer neighborhood, he would have ended up with a better class of friends. Jesus, Chris, what is wrong with you? So they end up heading down to a lake, and it's technically really a pond. They end up skipping stones and stuff. And they're like, oh, this is fun. They're going to have a last good night. Next day, Chris wakes up early, gets dressed and ready. Mom's excited to see him. And we finally get a little bit of description of her. She had already done her hair and makeup for work. As always, it was a little too much, in Chris's opinion. Her hair was dyed a shade of red that wasn't found in nature, and she was wearing a leopard print top, black leggings, and leopard print shoes. He wished she would aspire to simple elegance instead of cheap glamour. Wow, Chris, what is wrong with you? Jeez. I'm just reading it out. I'm not changing anything. I'm just reading exactly what he's saying and thinking. It's just, wow, why? So, she ends up saying that she's proud of him and everything, and she says, oh, I'll take you to school. Then Chris does this. He nearly chokes on his cornflakes, and he's like, why would I show up with her to school? And I'm like, oh my god, I'm hating this kid. I know, this is my second time reading through this, and I'm really hating this guy now. The first time I read through it, it's just note everything down, okay, good. Now I'm reading through it for a second time, I'm like, yeah, now my emotions are coming out, and I don't like this. You can like it. I'm not liking this. So he goes on the school bus. Josh and Kyle are sitting next to each other, and they're like, hey, Chris, time to turn ourselves back into the jailer, huh? Chris ignores him and looks across at the empty seat, but instead he passes by and goes to the back of the bus. Wow. That's harsh. So Mr. Little class is in 3rd grade. He waits till 3rd grade and finally gets there. There's a bunch of science puns in the room too. In science, matter matters. Think like a proton. Stay positive. And the shelves just have plenty of random different biological experiments. One jar held some poor creature's heart, another housed a fetal piglet with 2 perfectly formed heads, yet another contained what looked disturbingly like a human brain. Mr. Little stood before the lab table at the head of the classroom. He wore a white lab coat with over a collared shirt and a brightly colored necktie printed with the design of a DNA helix. He was a small, energetic man, and the little incarnation of his last name. And he was smiling like the master of ceremonies in a particularly exciting show. His safety goggles, worn over his regular glasses, made his eyes look huge and insectoid. "Come on in, don't find a seat, don't be shy." Why is it always Southern? Why can't I do something else? Like, come on. "Come on in, find a seat." No, that doesn't work either. "Come on in." What am I doing? Oh. I want to die on the inside. "Come on in, find a seat, don't be shy. I promise there will be no major explosions or dismemberments, at least not the first day." He flashed a naughty grin. "Alright, let's go ahead and get started." People are talking and everything, but Mr. Little ignores them, and instead of taking attendance or taking out his rolled-out book, he takes out a clear solution, pours it into a glass container held over a Bunsen burner, and a huge fireball just blasts out of it, and everybody just shuts up. And he's like, "I thought that would get your attention, but I promise you ain't seen nothing yet." Maybe he is Southern. "But I promise you ain't seen nothing yet." Yeah, that sounds more Southern. Why am I having an argument with this? Just read. This is silence. This is silence. This is the silence of the lands. Of the lands? What? What is going on? My speech, jeez, today. Springlock's going off. Oi, oi, oi. This is science, and it is not for the faint of heart or the cowardly. It's about just reading a textbook and answering questions correctly. That is incorrect. It is about innovative thinking. It's about getting your hands dirty. It's about experimenting with all that the word experiment implies. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we fail, but either way we learn. In this class, I may ask you to do some stuff that sounds kind of crazy, but I promise that if you bear with me and follow my advice, by the time you're done with this course, you'll be thinking, talking, walking, and quacking like a scientist. He looked around the room. Now, who's ready to learn some cool stuff? Everybody's excited. So, there's a lock-in that's going to happen on Friday. One of the most famous lock-ins in the school. He does one every year. And it's pretty exciting stuff like that. And he says, "Now, before we get to the fun stuff, we have to jump through a few bureaucratic hoops," Mr. Little said. "The first being this lab safety contract, which you and your parents must read and sign, saying that you will not intentionally blow up the school or another classmate." "Aw, where's the fun in that?" a kid in the front row asked, and everybody laughed. "Oh, it's always good fun until you have to scrub somebody's viscera off the walls," Mr. Little said. "I do hate it when students leave a mess." More laughter. So the boy sitting in front of Chris says, "Oh, are you going to lock-in?" He's like, "Yeah, of course I'm going to lock-in." Mr. Little also says, "There will be a meeting in this room right after school today for everybody who's interested in coming to lock-in this weekend. I strongly suggest you all come for the sake of your grades." He mouthed the words "extra credit," and for the sake of science. So, Chris ends up talking to the guy after once the class is dismissed, and it is Sanjay Patel. I believe that's how you say it. SANGJ, So Sanjay, I believe, unless it's Sanjet, but I'm going to say Sanjay. And then we meet Chris Watson, that's the last name of him, which is good to know because sometimes characters don't have last names. And he invites him to lunch and stuff. And then, the lunch is right after that. So he meets Brooke, which is she's a smaller African-American girl with curly black hair. And then Malcolm, who's a bit taller. And, oh yes, he's taller, lanky, and he has red hair. I was looking for the description of it. So, then they begin making jokes about Miss Harris's science class. about how they have to collect fall leaves and glue them together on construction paper and try and find the cafeteria, things like that. And Chris is helping them make fun of it, even though Josh and Kyle are in the class. So, it's very rude. The dismissal bell rings, and they end up talking about, what the science thing is going to be this year. It's going to be a life-changing experience, as they do say. And they're like, oh, hey, we got study groups Wednesdays at the Coffee Bean. Cool Beans Coffee. There you go. I don't know why I said Coffee Beans. There'd probably be a coffee shop's name. My spring locks are going off. Jesus. So, he's basically says Cool Beans Coffee, Wednesdays you can come, things like that. They go back to Mr. Little's class, where he's talking about sacrifice and stuff, in which they will have to, if I'm gonna say this, okay, here we go. In the past, some of our science club lock-ins have been group activities. This activity is one you will do alone. In fact, each of you will have a cubicle, sequestering you from the other students, and from me as well. Each of you will be issued your own Freddy Fazbear Mad Scientist kit to work with. In this kit, you will find a solution called Fazgoo. You will put the required amount of Fazgoo in the provided Petri dish. He smiled. Then comes for the sacrifice. With the pliers I will provide, you will pull one of your own teeth. And then one of the students asked, "Excuse me, Mr. Little, could you repeat that part?" "Teeth!" Mr. Little yelled. "You will pull one of your teeth. It might hurt a little, but trust me, it will be worth it in the end. Now, are you scientists, or are you a bunch of babies?" "Scientists!" most students yelled back. "Good," Mr. Little resumed his pacing. "So you will pull one of your teeth, as I said, and you will place it in the Fazgoo. Then you will do what scientists spend a great deal of time doing. You will wait. You will be provided with a cot to nap on while the process unfolds." "And what process is that?" one student asked. Well, what fun would it be if I told you that? All I'll say is that it's the process of discovery. You will know when you're done because the results will speak for themselves, literally. Then you will dispose of your creation in a biohazard bag and leave. A changed person, not just mentally, but mentally. He cackled at his own joke, and many students joined in on the laughter. "There is a rumor," Dr. Little said, that not participating in the lock-ins hurts your performance in my class. This is not exactly true, but if you do not participate in the lock-in, and you successfully complete all course requirements, you will still pass my class, possibly with an above-average grade. However, over the years, I have found that the students who do participate in the lock-in demonstrate a level of commitment that allows them not just to pass, but to excel. And the fact that the lock-in is worth 500 points of extra credit doesn't hurt either. He grabbed a stack of papers off his desk. Now, for those of you who are up for the challenge, I will now distribute the required parental permission sheets that allow you to participate in the lock-in. But please, make sure you don't say anything to your parents about the required tooth extraction. I don't want to be on the receiving end of any dental bills. Also, as a community of scientists, we must keep our secrets. Yeah, that's not very good. You're going to pull out your own teeth? I don't know if that's legal or not, pulling out your own teeth for a science experiment, especially at school, and the teachers encouraging it. He goes home, and his mom ends up calling a few hours afterwards. "Chris, your friends are at the door." And Chris goes, "Again?" "Tell them I have homework," Chris yelled. "Come tell them yourself," his mom yelled back. Chris rolled his eyes, but he got up from the bed. He went to the door to see Josh and Kyle. "Hey," he said, "can't hang out tonight. I've got homework." "We just stopped by for a sec," Josh said. "Kyle's mom is going to drive us to the mall on Friday. We're going to eat food at the court and see the new Revengers movie. We wondered if you wanted to come." The new Avengers movie? It's Avengers Endgame. Confirmed, guys. Avengers Endgame exists in the FNAF universe. It was kind of them to ask, but their pastime seems so childish now. "Thanks, guys. I'd love to, but I've got the science club lock-in that night." "Oh, you're doing that?" Kyle said, sounding incredulous. "It seems kind of sad to spend most of a weekend in the school." "Well, I think it's exciting," Chris said. Kyle and Josh exchanged a look. "Just don't go deep into the science club stuff, okay?" Josh said. Some people in Miss Harris's class were talking about it yesterday. They say it's weird, like a cult or something. Chris couldn't help but be offended. Josh and Carl might not be cut out for science club themselves, but they could at least show it in the proper respect. Well, people in science club talk about the people in Miss Harris's class too, Chris said. Yeah, Carl said. They say we're dumb. Because they're snobs, Josh added. Carl gave Chris a strange look. You're not turning into a snob, are you, Chris? No, of course not, Chris said. He hated that word, snob. It was what underachievers called high achievers to try and make them feel better about themselves. Well, he refused to take the bait. You think Josh and me are dumb? Carl asked. Chris cringed a little. It's Josh and I, he thought, reflexively. And you're not dumb, you just lack maturity and ambition. But he figured it would be a bad idea to say either of those things out loud. No, of course not, Chris said again. Look, guys, maybe... I've got to go back to my homework. Maybe we can do something next Friday, okay? They said, sure, and okay. But Chris could feel the distance between him and his friends growing. It was a painful transition, but it was probably for the best. Bye, guys, Chris said and shut the door. In the living room, Chris's mom was leaning over Emma, who was sitting on the couch. Count to 3 before you do it, okay? Emma said. Before you do what? Chris asked. His mom looked over at him. Emma's got a loose tooth. I'm going to pull it for her. Chris felt his stomach lurch. Well, don't do it while I'm in here. You know that stuff grosses me out. And that's when he got his genius idea. A loose tooth. And his family is the type that saves a loose tooth. So he's like, I know exactly what I'm going to do. He's just going to get one of his previous baby teeth and use it. So, Chris usually walks past Cool Beans Coffee, but today he walks inside. He doesn't know exactly what to grab. So, he talks to the pretty young woman at the counter. Yes, that's how she's described. And he doesn't know exactly what he wants. So she ends up asking, do you like chocolate? Of course, I'm not stupid. What kind of weirdo didn't like chocolate? Chris thought. She smiled again. Let's try an iced mocha. Then just give me a couple minutes. She turned her back on him and poured some different syrups in the machine. It cost $2, more than what he expected. And he digs through his pockets and backpack for change. And takes his expensive beverage and begins to, drink and stuff. Nothing really interesting here, just that Brooke's mom is a dentist, and sacrificing a tooth may be a little bit suspicious if it's gone. They don't know exactly what to expect from the Lockins. And then they bring up this. It'll do something, though. That's for sure, Brooke said. Hopefully nobody will end up in the emergency room like last year. Chris almost choked on his coffee. Wait, what? Brooke laughed. Some kid didn't follow the instructions right and ended up having to have a couple of fingers reattached. It was his own fault, though. He ended up transferring to Miss Harris' science class, where he was less likely to maim himself. The experiments are always perfectly safe if you know what you're doing, but that clearly didn't, Malcolm said. Speaking of knowing what we're doing, if we're calling ourselves a study group, we better get down to studying. Ends up passing by. He gives his mom the permission slip later that day, and he's like, can I get a raise? Like $10, and his mom's like, why do you need $10 more? Like, Cool Beans Coffee for money. And she's just like, gotten hooked on that stuff already? And she says this line, listen, kid, those frou-frou coffee drinks are real money suckers. One gal I work with used to buy one every day, and when she quit the stuff, she was amazed how much money she saved. The fact that she was lecturing him was not promising. Why can't you guys study at the library? The library's free. And Chris says, Mom, I didn't start the study group, I just joined it. And she's like, okay, I'll give you a small raise of $5. That's more than I get. I get $0 a week. And I do chores every single day. Like, jeez. So, it turns out to be Friday. And because it is the lovely Friday, it is time for the lock-in. Mr. Little begins to go over directions, and he also says that he's ordered pizza for him. And this is the quote from him. It's going to be a long night, and you should never conduct scientific research on an empty stomach. But while we wait for sustenance, allow me to explain more specifically what you'll be doing tonight. As you can see, I have set up private cubicles for each of you in the lab. In your cubicle, you will find a long table and a cot for napping. On the table, you will find a Freddy Fazbear Mad Scientist kit. There are a few chuckles in the class, and one kid said, "But isn't that kit just a toy?" "It is most definitely not a toy," Mr. Little replied, his voice turning stern suddenly. "And if you treat it as one, it will be at your own peril." He held up the kit for everyone to see and open it. In the kit, you will find a container of Fazgoo and a petri dish, like this. He held up a vial of pink glop in a small dish. You will empty the Fazgoo into the petri dish. Then comes the sacrifice. "The tooth," Chris half whispered. "Okay, fine." "The tooth," Chris half whispered. "Yes, the tooth," Mr. Little said. So, moving on from there, Mr. Little says, "I like my students to be fully committed. After you have extracted the truth, you will place it in the petri dish of Fazgoo. And that," he said, rubbing his hands together, "is when things will start to get interesting. You see, the Fazgoo will not only make the tooth stay alive, it will make the tooth believe it is still a part of you." "A tooth can believe something?" Brooke said. "Well, it can feel that it's still inside your mouth," Mr. Little said. "The Fazgoo is very powerful. When you touch it, it creates a connection that slowly pulls red blood cells from your body. The blood cells feed the Fazgoo and fuel the experiment. And here's the amazing part. Over the course of the next several hours, nourished by just a few of your red blood cells, the tooth will grow gums, will form a full mouth, and that mouth will open and tell you something that I promise, no matter how old you live to be, you will never forget." That is quite incredible, you know. So he ends up giving out pizza. Then it is time for the experiment. Within a couple minutes, he hears grunts and groans, other students. He takes out his tooth, he fakes it. He hears, a nearby scream as somebody pulls out their tooth too. He takes out his baby tooth, which he had in a little baggie, and ends up sticking it in. He's like, "Oh yes, this is going to go perfectly." He submerges the old baby tooth in the Fazgoo, and he begins to touch the goo. He feels a slight sucking sensation, and the tendril of pink slime connects to his index finger. Pretty interesting, and stretchy like mozzarella cheese, as he says. That dang Fazgoo. Now you know why there's pink goo dripping from the top of it. Because not only is it a cool design choice, but it's also pink Fazgoo, which makes sense, and why there wasn't any other animatronics on there. So, Chris ends up going to sleep, and he begins thinking of himself as a distinguished professor, but he starts having dreams about blood dripping from his lower lip, and his mouth was a black cavern, and gums nobody's teeth. He has no teeth in there, and he gets up. He hears movement, whispering, things like that, and then he hears a voice from the next cubicle, and he hears, "Wow," she said, her voice filled with awe. "Wow." There's a rattle of plastic, which could have been a biohazard bag. Then the sound of footsteps. Chris pushed one of his cubicle's partitions open just a crack so he could watch the student leave. It was Brooke, but the look on her face was different than her usual smart, collected expression. Somehow her features seemed softer, more open. Her eyes were wide and full of wonder. She walked up to Mr. Little and handed him the biohazard bag. Brooke rested her hand on Mr. Little's forearm and looked him in the eyes. "She told me everything," Brooke said. Mr. Little smiled. "Good. Nice work, Brooke. You're free to go." Brooke smiled at Mr. Little and wandered toward the door. Chris was about to close a small opening in the partition when he saw another student, a tall, dark-haired boy he hadn't met yet, emerge from a cubicle across the classroom. Just like Brooke, he wore an expression of amazement. He walked up to Mr. Little and handed him the biohazard bag. "He told me everything," the boy said, placing his hand on Mr. Little's shoulder. "Dang spring knocks again. Messing with my vocal cords." I just read that. Okay. Mr. Little smiled and nodded. "Good. Nice work, Jacob. You're free to go." "Thank you," the boy said, as though Mr. Little had just given him a gift. Kristen closes it, and nothing's really happening. He doesn't know what's going on. He dozes back to sleep, and he wakes up more groggy, puddle of drool and stuff. He looks over at the petri dish, and the goo has outgrown it now. And it was just like a really pink blob of random stuff. he hears movement and stuff, and he hears, "He told me everything." Stuff like that. Then he hears more movement, shuffling, footsteps, things like that, while he's still laying on the cot. And somebody says, "Permission to enter?" A voice said from outside the partition. "Sure," Chris said. Mr. Little steps in. He asks how it's going. He doesn't know exactly. He's like, very curious. Did I do something wrong? Experiments go, this one is pretty impossible to mess up, Mr. Little said, rubbing his chin. You did put one of your own teeth in there, didn't you? Yes, sir, Chris said, not elaborating on the age or origin of the tooth. Well, sometimes in science, we just have to admit that we don't know why things are happening as they are. The way I see it, Chris, you've got two choices. You can end the experiment and say it just didn't turn out for whatever reason, dispose of whatever that thing is that you've got there, and go home and play video games or whatever you do on your own time. He smiled. Or you can acknowledge that something interesting is happening, even if we don't quite know what it is, and give it some time to see what happens. Chris didn't have to ask himself which choice a real scientist would make. I'd like to give it some more time if that's okay. It's more than okay. I admire your patience. It's an excellent quality for a scientist to have. Most scientific endeavors worth doing require a great amount of patience and determination. And to be honest, I'm glad you made this choice. I'm pretty curious to see how this one turns out myself. I'll check back later, okay? So here's a few moments later, he hears more. He told me everything. She told me everything. He told me everything. He ends up calling out for Mr. Little, and he ends up saying, Yes, Chris? Am I the only one left? You are. His tone was pleasant. No worries, though. Should I give up so you can go home? Chris wondered if Mr. Little had a wife and some littles waiting on him, wondering why the lock-in was taking so long. Of course not. I've got no place else to be. And if you're willing to wait, so am I. Patience and determination. So, he falls back asleep, he wakes up again, and he notices that the mass had quintupled its size, and was too large to fit in the biohazard bag now. It was still slimy and pink, and it was no longer a blob. It was a limbless human torso, now pulsing with life. And it expanded in contraction. It was like it was breathing. He looked at the tendril. It was now thick and strong, and it pulsed in unison with the strange thing's organs. Chris gasped when he realized why the pattern of the pulsing seemed so familiar. The thing's organs and tendril that connected him to it were throbbing with the beat of Chris's own heart. Now that's a shudderful moment. And then he realized that he needs to go pee. And he attempts to move, but he doesn't really feel like it. And then all of a sudden, he feels the pressure in his bladder disappear. He looks over at the thing on the table. It expels a large amount of fluid that hit the floor with a splash. Yep, it was his pee. Very weird. He decides to cut the cord. He looked around. It's not really there. There wasn't a sword or... a sword. Yes, he's going to cut off a sword. There wasn't a sword or scissors, anything like that. So he tries to break it apart. It doesn't work. He takes the pliers, and he grabs into the tendril, trying to remove it. And it felt like somebody was choking the life out of him. It felt like his air supply got cut off, and he was like, oh my god, what's going on? He has to stop, and he has to lay down. And he doesn't know what to do. He ends up falling in his own pee. And, yeah, he just feels so tired he can't. So, after he gets his breath back, he gets back up, he gets on the cot. Then all of a sudden, he feels a sudden suck. And his left eye is gone. He feels up, doesn't know where it is. Then he looks over at the being, which now has a left eye, and is looking up at him. He has no idea what to think. He is apparently becoming a living donor for it. He yells, help! He yelled with a voice that was thinner and weaker than he would have liked it. Help! Mr. Little! Anybody! I'm over here! Help me! And there's no response or anything. And the yelling tires him out. And he begins to think about how harsh he was treating Josh and Kyle, and about Pork Chop. He begins to start redeeming himself. And then he ends up falling a little bit back asleep. He wakes back up only a few moments later because he's just so tired. And the blob is now sitting up with, it's completely human now. It looks like him. And he says, "Listen," his voice finally came out as a croak. "My mom and dad, they're going to love you because they love me. Be nice to them." He stopped trying to catch his breath. Breathing used to be so easy, he never even thought about it. "Be nice to my sister, too. She's a good kid, a Girl Scout. She's your sister now." The words were hard to get out, but he had more than he needed to say. "Miss Thomas, our neighbor, she's old. She's a nice lady. Help her out when you can. And play with Porkchop." The creature followed his brow, looking confused. "I am to play with a Porkchop?" Chris felt his last strength fading. He whispered, "Porkchop is my dog. Yours now." Chris felt the tendril that connected him to his life was disintegrating. "Take care of him." He felt a strange sensation of sucking where his right eye was, and then everything goes black. And then he feels more slurping sounds, and he begins to think parts of him he knew he couldn't live without. It was like the creature was drinking him, sucking the last of his organs through a long straw like the dregs of a milkshake, leaving only an empty vessel. Chris, as the creature would have learned to call itself, stood over the shapeless mass of empty flesh on the cot. He opened the biohazard bag and stuffed the fleshy remains of the experiment inside of it. He was surprised that he was able to cram all of it into one bag, and when he picked it up, the contents were surprisingly light. It left the cubicle and found Mr. Little sitting at his desk, drinking from a styrofoam cup of coffee and munching on a donut. "Well, good morning, Chris," Mr. Little said, standing up and brushing crumbs from his mustache. "You had a long night, didn't you? But don't keep me in suspense. Did you finally complete the experiment? Did you get the results you wanted?" The new Chris's eyes were wide and full of wonder. Soon he would be stepping out of the classroom and out of the school and into the world for the first time. Chris handed the biohazard bag to Mr. Little. He looked into the teacher's eyes and smiled. "He told me everything," he said. As Chris walked outside the school building, the sun was warm on his face. The sky was blue, the clouds were white and fluffy, and birds chirped in the trees. Chris smiled. It was a beautiful day. And that was He Told Me Everything. Pretty long one, longer than The Breaking Wheel, or slightly longer than The Breaking Wheel. Then again, I spoke a lot more about this one too. And of course, the book was by Scott Cawthon, Andrea Rains Wagner, and Ellie Cooper. Great job. The Stitch Ray story, you're gonna have to wait on that. I'm sorry. I'm probably gonna do the Stitch Ray stories all in one giant section and do them as just like one mega book, or do them in parts for the podcast series. But otherwise, hope you enjoyed the Cliffs. It was very fun reading through it and going back over it. The Breaking Wheel gave me anxiety, and this one, of course, caused my voice to malfunction multiple times. Thank you for listening. If you liked it, give it a like, and I will see you for Into the Pit, which will be the next one. Bye-bye.